I'm sorry you find the Constitution absurd, but you should try reading it.
No,
it gives Congress the power to declare the war.
Did I say the Constitution is absurd?
Of what you just said.
He's like, I didn't say that. What you said a moment ago, the idea that the president would need authorization from Congress before killing the head of state and invading and bombing and destroying a regime, he said that idea is absurd. We're going to check in and react to a segment that I just did on Newsmax, the very right-wing cable TV station, which, you know what? It's very interesting. I started going on there because they were actually looking to have a different perspective that was more critical of Trump, and I appreciate that because, unfortunately, a lot of their coverage gives North Korea, right? It gives like the North Korean TV hosts, where like the way they're setting up the story, the guests they're bringing on are just like praising Trump to the high heavens, and anything he says and does is amazing, and dear leader has it all figured out. But for a couple of their shows, they've started inviting me on and others, and also like actual liberals and Democrats to provide a different perspective. And I appreciate that. And I am supportive of dialogue and discourse, so I will agree to do it on occasion. And I did it yesterday, and we talked about Trump's war with Iran, which to me, I've already given my thoughts on this, but I'm very skeptical about how it's being done, how it's remotely consistent with the Constitution, what the objectives are, what the end goals are. And I wanted to spotlight this and talk about this and raise these concerns. I went on alongside somebody named Joe Pino, I believe, and he is a former Republican candidate, and he really, it was giving like praising dear leader. And I did really object to some of the things we said, and we ended up having kind of a fiery exchange. But I think the whole thing is worth listening to and thinking about. So I'm just going to go through with it. I'm just going to go through with y'all and give you my thoughts as we go along. So let's watch.
Joe Pinion, I want your opinion on this, because also you had Clinton. You have plenty of, he's conducted strikes on Kosovo.
I don't know what it is about their system. Sorry to pause already, but like, why do I look green? Why am I giving Shrek? Like, that's not how my camera looks on my end, so I don't know what they did, but...
Kosovo, I know, I'm ethnic Albanian. I know all what Clinton did, and he saved the Albanian people. He didn't get congressional approval. So what do you think, among other presidents, have done similarly to Obama and to Trump? So what do you make of the criticism that Trump is getting for doing what he's doing in Iran?
Well, I'll pause on that before we get to his answer, because he did this annoying thing where he didn't really answer the question at all. He just kind of gave his take, though that is the nature of the game, and I'm sure I sometimes do that. However, she pointed this out, and I actually don't have it here, but they did a whole lengthy introduction that was focused on how Democrats have supported basically wars or military operations without congressional approval in the past. They played a clip of Nancy Pelosi saying that Obama didn't need authorization, and they're saying, look, Democrats who are now citing the Constitution and accusing Trump of violating it are hypocrites. And I completely agree. That is 100% true. But I feel like they're only looking at one side of that coin. By the same stretch, the Democrats are hypocrites. Well, Republican lawmakers cried bloody murder then, and now are supporting it. So that is also hypocritical, unless you're saying that now the Republican model for president is Barack Obama, and that now we support doing the things that he did, because or the precedents he set are therefore now fair game and good. That's not really how it's supposed to work. If you believe that a past president violated the Constitution, you're not supposed to say, well, now it's our turn to do it too. That's like not a principled or consistent approach to a constitutional order. And I do always find it so fascinating, because pointing out the hypocrisy is interesting and important, but only if you yourself are being consistent, not if you're pointing it out and also accidentally pointing out that you are now also hypocritical, which is what I feel like happens in a lot of these conversations with Trump. But let's listen to what Joe says here.
Sometimes people can't see themselves for who they really are. My grandmother, she used to have a saying, bless her heart, she doesn't have a friend or a mirror. And right now with the Democratic Party, they don't seem to have a brain or a history book. We are talking about the leader in state-sponsored terrorism. We are talking about individuals that want to bring death to America. You cannot negotiate with people that do not believe in your right to exist. And so I want to be on the side of the Iranian people, clamoring for the type of freedom that they had between 1950 and 1979, when women could go to school, when women had the right to vote, when women had family protections, all the things that the Democrats bang on the table about here at home. And so the fact that somehow we are concerned about the civil rights of a deceased Ayatollah who didn't believe in them shows you just how off pace the entirety of this nonsense really has become.
I want to pause on that for a couple seconds because obviously in these short cable segments, you don't really have time to discuss and reflect on everything. But there's a couple problems with this. He didn't really address any of the questions about the Constitution, which gives Congress the power to declare war. And we went over this the other day. No, the War Powers Resolution does not give the president the ability to just launch a war and then notify Congress. That's not what it says if you go back and look at it. And even if it did say that, that would be unconstitutional. But so just talking about how bad the Ayatollah is doesn't address the procedural and constitutional concerns about the way he was addressed at all, like literally at all. And there are lots of bad and evil people in the world, and there's lots of oppressive and repressive societies in the world that we don't send all of our military in and go kill their leaders and try to take over and install a new regime and fix the whole world. And in fact, President Trump spent his entire political career decrying that kind of approach. So that's one problem with this. He doesn't really address the actual argument. And then secondly, I don't like this framing of him saying like, well, I want to be on the side of the Iranian people, not the side of the regime. And you shouldn't care about the civil rights of the Ayatollah. And it's like, okay, caring about whether the government is following our Constitution is not about the civil rights of the Ayatollah. It's about whether our government is abiding by the limits on its power placed by our founders, who were insightful and wise in ways that genuinely blow your mind. When you go back and I've been doing this, like reading the writings about Thomas Jefferson, about the power to make war versus the power to declare war. And they thought about this stuff so profoundly. And so it's not about the civil rights of the regime, right? It's about the constitutional limitations on an executive, on somebody who's like the most powerful human to ever exist. And preserving those limitations and checks and balances is actually important. And more importantly, it doesn't mean you support the regime. It is a false and demagogic presentation to say you're either with the Iranian people or if you don't support our war, you support the regime. No, 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 no. You can think the regime is evil. You can be glad these bastards are dead and still not think that what we're doing is right legally, morally, or practically and going to work out well. And it is like a very dishonest simplification and straw man to try to boil it down to, oh, you're against this, so you support the evil dictator. The real world is a lot more complicated than that. And there have been situations in the past where we went after a very bad guy, took him out, destabilized and changed the regime, and chaos and civil war ensued for the people. That was actually ended up being worse for them than the evil dictator that we took out. So it's a lot more complicated than that, and I did not appreciate the way he framed it as you're either with the regime or against it. I think it's a lot more nuanced than that.
It has become.
We've seen American protesters picking up their signs, protesting in favor of the Iranian regime, just to point out how it shifted. First, it was No Kings protest that we've seen, and now it's hands off Iran. And it goes to the question, Brad, do the protesters and those speaking out against the strikes in Iran, do they really understand the ideology but behind the governing body, behind the supreme leader, behind the Ayatollah?
I will say I disagree with that framing slightly, right? He's saying like these protesters are protesting in favor of the Ayatollah and the regime. I'm sure there's some are. I'm sure that you can find some, and those people are crazy. But also a lot of them are just protesting against the war is not the same thing as protesting in favor of the Ayatollah. And I think that's important to note.
Obviously, I think anybody shedding tears for the Iranian regime itself That's foolish beyond belief. But it's not true that in order to have questions about what the Trump administration is doing here, you have to have any love lost for the regime or the Ayatollah. Because very simply, the same way that Democrats are absolutely hypocritical when it comes to suddenly worrying about congressional authorization after not really being bothered by President Obama engaging in acts in Libya and elsewhere without congressional authorization, well, Republicans are hypocrites on this too. So many of them cried bloody murder, whether it's Mike Lee, whether it's Ted Cruz, whether it's Tim Scott, about Obama doing it, and now are clapping like seals as President Trump launches a war. It is a war. He has called it a war himself. And when you kill a head of state and you wipe out huge swaths of regime officials, you bomb hundreds of people and they die with your military, in direct conflict with their military, that's a war. And the talking point going out from the Trump administration that this is not a war is gaslighting. Be honest, make the case for it. But frankly, the constitutional questions are very serious, and we should be upfront about what is and isn't happening.
That's a point there. I mean,
I love this from her. Bless her heart. But like whenever you say something, because they're used to like 90% of the time on Newsmax, it's just like they take turns praising dear leader. And so when you go on there and you say something at all different, they're a little like, they're just not quite sure how to respond. Like, but that's a point there. I mean, shout out to you, Queen. But I found that hysterical. I'm laughing in my head that they responded like that.
There. I mean, he did call it a war himself. So Joe Pinion, let's talk about these protesters out in the streets. You saw them right here outside of our studios for Gaza, human rights, this and that. What about the human rights of what was going on in Iran under this brutal regime, specifically women covered head to toe? They were basically considered property. What about those human rights? Why does the left seem to pick and choose who they want to advocate for?
Well, I'll pause on that, and I certainly think that's a valid point, but the flip side is also true, that we ally with countries and sell weapons to countries like Saudi Arabia that repress women in very similar ways to the way that Iran did, and I guess maybe still will, maybe won't, depending on how this all shakes out. And it's like I thought that the whole America First thing was about not being the police of the world. But so when you just selectively talk about that, do we view it as the role of the American military to go into every foreign country where women's rights are oppressed and overthrow the regime? I do not. I don't think that it's at all remotely. I absolutely wish for women, minorities, and everyone to have civil liberties and freedom. And I want societies across the world to become more modernized and less repressive. But the idea that we're going to, well, Iran oppresses women, so that's a justification for waging war against them, seems pretty inconsistent, given with the regimes that we do ally with and do business with all the time that are equally as repressive, and the fact that there are so many other countries that we're not going to invade that are repressed. It's like, since when is that the Republican position in the Trump era? Of this, like, we're going to spread freedom throughout the world with our military. I don't know. Did we just flash back in time to the Bush era? But I guess we'll take a look at Joe's response here.
I mean, look, I think I would agree with my colleague. Yes, you can have questions about the administration without losing any sleep over the Ayatollah. But that's not what is happening here. I think we are well beyond the clutching of the pearls when it comes to the expansion of the power of the office of the president.
I'm sorry. I'm not beyond it. And I think conservatives who say they care about limited government and the Constitution should not dismiss being concerned with the insane power the president has amassed and is exercising unilaterally, the office of the president, not Trump specifically, but he's now the latest to kind of expand it and push it. That is not clutching pearls. That is trying to conserve our constitutional order and our system of limited government and checks and balances. If you don't clutch your pearls about that as a conservative, what is the point and what are you conserving? I don't know.
Ship has sailed. I do believe, though, that the notion that we're going to have to go and ask Congress that can't even name a post office if we have permission to...
Pause on that. That's kind of a funny line, but actually one of the only things Congress is regularly able to do successfully is rename stuff and pass bills like naming things and designating things, often to reward their donors. So it's kind of a funny line, but it's actually not fully accurate.
You kill the Ayatollah, a man who quite literally is pulling the strings for the Houthis and every bad actor known to man, I think is absurd. So yes, we should try to have a reasonable conversation about constraining those powers, but the notion that we're going to sit here and die on this hill for this Ayatollah, for this regime that has gone out of their way to effectively say they do not want the very peace they claim they desire over and over again. I just think that that's fundamentally dishonest if we're actually going to get down to the nuts and bolts here.
So this is where it gets a little spicy, a little fiery. And obviously I'm being a bit adversarial here, but it's nothing personal. And I'm just like, what we do is show business. I'm sorry, whether you like it or not. And that's why they're having these panels, is they want some contentious exchange of ideas. And so I decided I would provide it.
I'm sorry you find the Constitution absurd, but you should try reading it.
No,
it gives Congress the power to declare the war.
Did I say the Constitution is
implication of what you just said.
So I'll pause on this. He's like, I didn't say that. What you said a moment ago is that the idea that the president would need authorization from Congress before killing the head of state and invading and bombing and destroying a regime, starting a war with another country, he said that idea is absurd. That idea is very clearly what the framers of the Constitution envisioned when they gave Congress the power to declare war. Now, I agree we've moved a long way from that, but so yes, you are saying our Constitution, as originally written and intended, is absurd. It is not the literal quote that you said, of course, but it is the meaning of what you're saying. And I'm trying to break that down and challenge it. And he did not like that, unsurprisingly.
You just said that the idea that they have to get permission from Congress is absurd. And you're so quick to call everyone dishonest and dismiss these concerns as a straw man. I actually think the American people have legitimate concerns. Only 1 in 4 Americans is supportive of this effort. And that's the whole point of having to get congressional approval before you launch a war where 6 American soldiers have already died. And God forbid more may. This is supposed to be a deliberative process with buy-in from the representatives of the people, not something one man launches unilaterally.
Absolutely. We should have buy-in from the American people. That's why we have representatives in the House of Representatives.
All right, let's just pause on that. We should have buy-in from the American people. That's why we have a House of Representatives that is elected by the people. But you don't think the president needs or should seek their authorization. So you actually don't care. Like, do you see how that doesn't make sense? We should have buy-in from the people and their representatives, but also it's absurd to suggest the president should make sure there's buy-in before doing what he wants and starting a war. This isn't adding up. The math isn't mathing. I'm simply asking y'all to make sense.
Absolutely. I have not suggested anything other than that. But what I did say and what I stand by is the fact that trying to classify a strike that kills the Ayatollah, a man who is masquerading by day as a head of state and by night as a terrorist, as if there's any division, is absurd. Right, and I think that is what I'm talking about. To try to twist my words and say something else.
It's not twisting your words to present to you the implications of the things you're saying. And I'm sorry, but there is division over the wisdom of this and of whether this is consistent with Trump's promises, whether you like it or not. And frankly, I enjoy these debates. I think the clip of it's gotten a lot of attention on X, and I am always willing to do adversarial media. I'm bored of and will often decline invitations to do media where they just want to bring you on to agree with the host and like on Democrats or woke people or whatever. It's like I do that enough on my own channel, and I want to, if I'm going to do outside media, I want to discuss something. I want to challenge an idea. I want to square off about something. I want to provide a perspective to the audience that is not what everyone else on the network is saying. That's what I'm interested in doing. And so, yes, I will do Newsmax, and I'll do it again. And I'm glad to keep having conversations like this and segments like this. But y'all let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you agree with me or do you agree with Joe? Totally get it. If you do, you're welcome to have that opinion. And I certainly acknowledge that there's nuance to be had here. and a variety of perspectives of people in good faith. But anyway, guys, let me know what you think about that one in the comments. Hit the like button and all of that.